From turning a morally complex heroine into a morally spotless one, to a theft that never actually happened. Starting with number 10, Sophie's ethnicity. In Julia Quinn's novel, Sophie Beckett is white, and her struggle is entirely about class. She's the illegitimate daughter of an earl, and that stain on her birth defines how she's treated. Race never factors into her story. Netflix's Bridgerton changes that by casting Sophie as an East Asian woman and reworking her place in Regency England. In this version, diversity is part of the world itself, not just set dressing. And here's the thing, this isn't just a cosmetic change. In the book, Sophie's marginalization is purely about illegitimacy. In the show, she's navigating a world where race and class intersect. The novel asks, what does it mean to be born on the wrong side of the sheets? The show asks, what does it mean to be born on the wrong side of everything? Netflix turns a straightforward class conflict into something more complex. Whether that deepens the romance or weighs it down will depend on execution. But the setting now operates on broader social tensions than the book ever explored. Number 9, Francesca's love interest. In the books, Francesca Bridgerton falls in love with Michael Sterling, the male cousin of her late husband. It's complicated, full of guilt and grief, but also desire. The show decided to shake things up and make Michael a woman. So now Francesca's love interest is Michaela. Same family, same story, just a different gender. This is one of the most radical changes Netflix has made to the Bridgerton canon, and it triggered immediate reactions online. Michael's romance in the books is straight, so flipping the gender doesn't just swap pronouns, it changes the whole dynamic and what's at stake. Regency-era queer romance isn't just forbidden love, it's criminalized love. The stakes go from what will society think to what will the law do to us. Netflix is signaling that no character's endgame is sacred, and if you're expecting a faithful adaptation of Francesca's book, you're in for a very different story. Number 8, masquerade ball costume change. In the book, Penelope Featherington shows up to the masquerade ball dressed as a leprechaun. It's awkward, embarrassing, and perfectly captures how out of place she feels in high society. The show threw that costume in the trash and dressed her as a pirate instead. And that one change says everything about how Netflix views Penelope's character arc. In the book, Penelope is awkward. She makes choices that highlight how uncomfortable she is in society, and sometimes she kind of traps herself there. On the show, she's the opposite. She chooses to stand out, owns it, and isn't apologizing for existing. The costume change feels like part of a bigger shift in how the show approaches its female leads. Netflix doesn't want its heroines to be pathetic. Even when they're struggling, they're framed as self-aware, capable, and a little bit powerful. Number 7, employment at Bridgerton House. In the book, Benedict pressures Sophie into working for his mother in London and threatens to falsely accuse her of theft if she refuses. The tension comes from coercion and a power imbalance that makes his behavior morally troubling. The show withheld that information. Benedict doesn't tell her until they arrive. He arranges a job for Sophie at his family home without warning her in advance, then reveals it at the doorstep. The scene is framed as thoughtless and class blind, rather than actively cruel, because the explicit blackmail element is gone. Number 6, Philip Cavender assault scene. In the book, Sophie is the one being targeted. Philip Cavender and his friends corner her, and it's not subtle what's about to happen. It's frightening and ugly, and it makes very clear how vulnerable she is as a working class woman with no one to protect her. Benedict steps in and stops it, and that moment stays with both of them. It shapes how he sees her, how she sees him, and how their relationship develops. The show changes the scene completely. Instead of Sophie being the one in danger, she's the one stepping in to protect another maid from assault. Benedict still arrives, but now he's backing her up rather than rescuing her. In the novel, Sophie is someone who survives violence. In the series, she's framed as someone who confronts it. Netflix clearly wanted to avoid depicting Sophie as a helpless damsel, but in doing so, they reduced the intensity of the trauma that shaped her character in the novel. The book doesn't shy away from the reality that women in Sophie's position were targets. The show sidesteps that uncomfortable truth in favor of making her a hero. It's a noble intention that undercuts the original story's emotional weight. Number 5, timeline after the masquerade ball. In Julia Quinn's novel, Benedict meets Sophie at the masquerade ball, dances with her, and basically builds this whole fantasy around her after one night and then doesn't see her again for 2 years. And during that time, Sophie's circumstances change completely. She's forced into servitude, she cuts her hair, she loses weight, and she's worn down by everything she's had to survive. So when they finally meet again, it makes sense that he doesn't recognize her. She isn't the luminous girl from the ball anymore. The show shortens that timeline to a few weeks, maybe months. In the book, the long stretch of time makes the missed recognition feel bittersweet and believable. On screen, with far less distance between their meetings, it can come across as Benedict simply not paying attention. Netflix prioritized momentum over mythology, and the romance suffers for it. Number 4, cottage cottage clothing incident. In the book, Sophie ends up in Benedict's breeches because there's no other clothing at the cottage. It's awkward, funny, and a little scandalous because she's literally in his pants. In the show, she finds an old dress that belonged to one of Benedict's sisters. There's no cross-dressing and none of that playful tension. This is another example of the show choosing tonal restraint over playful intimacy. The novel leans into the humor of forced proximity and improvised domesticity. The show opts for realism and avoids anything that might feel like a sitcom setup. Whether you think that's mature storytelling or bland risk aversion probably depends on how much you value quirky romantic tropes versus grounded drama. Number 3, Benedict's injury and illness. In the book, Benedict falls seriously ill after the Cavender attack, but not because of the fight itself, he just comes down with a bad fever. Sophie takes care of him in private, and it's in those quiet, unremarkable moments that their bond deepens. There's nothing dramatic forcing the situation, it's just vulnerability and tenderness. The show changes it. Benedict gets cut on broken glass during the fight, and the wound gets infected. Sophie still nurses him, but now it's a direct consequence of the action rather than something that happens naturally. It's a small change, but it changes the feeling. The book lets intimacy grow from stillness and care. The show ties it to injury and danger, turning quiet moments into something earned through action. Netflix clearly prefers emotional closeness to come from visible stakes rather than subtle vulnerability. Number 2, lake scene and mistress proposal. In Julia Quinn's novel, the lake encounter is intense. It's sexually charged, emotionally raw, and during their time at the cottage, Benedict actually asks Sophie to become his mistress. Sophie says no because she's terrified of ending up like her mother, a woman with no security, no respect, and a child who would suffer the same way she did. The show softens all of that. The lake scene is gentler, less explicit, and the whole mistress proposal happens later in the season instead of right after their intimate moment. In the book, Sophie is forced to face the brutal reality of being a woman in Regency England. If she says yes, she risks pregnancy, social ruin, and continuing the cycle that destroyed her mother's life. If she says no, she might lose the man she loves. The show pushes that moment aside. It's safer, cleaner, and a lot less compelling. Netflix wanted a love story, but the book is really about the moral consequences of Sophie's choices. Number 1, shoe clips and escape from stepmother. In the novel, Sophie's stepmother Araminta is physically abusive. When Sophie finally escapes, she steals shoe clips and money to survive. It's a morally gray moment that shows Sophie isn't a perfect victim, she's desperate, and she does what she has to do. The show erased that entirely. In the adaptation, Sophie's stepsister Posey secretly gives her the shoe clips. Sophie commits no theft, and she's fully innocent. And that change is probably the clearest signal of how the adaptation shifts her character. The book gives Sophie moral complexity. She's not a saint, she's a survivor who makes hard choices. The show removes all of that ambiguity and turns her into a flawless martyr who never does anything wrong. It's protective, but it's also condescending. The novel trusts readers to empathize with a woman who steals to survive. The show doesn't trust audiences to root for someone who isn't morally spotless. And that's the real difference between Julia Quinn's Sophie and Netflix's Sophie. One is a complicated human being, the other is a narrative ideal.